Hello, Feuzion. My name is Alex Hughes, the host of Fusion News, and we have another big show for you right now. I am on the phone with ESPN founder Bill Rasmussen. Bill, 40 years next year for ESPN. When you hear that, what do you think that the creation of ESPN, what do you think? This is your kid, basically.
Hang on, I have to get rid of. There we go. I'm sorry, Alex.
No
I had
problem.
some background. You coming in the background from the other side. Going back 40 years ago, you're talking about what the television industry was and what the digital industry. I mean, it's just amazing what has happened over the last 40 years. It's. I was around when television began back in 1940, and ABC came on the air in 1950, and it seemed like they were the giants, and it was amazing. How do these pictures fly through the air? We were very naive in those days. And then in 1978, I was working for the Hartford Whalers, the New England Whalers in Hartford, Connecticut. Got fired. Cable television was just kind of struggling along. We had about 12.5 million homes in the country had the ability to get any cable TV. We didn't have computers. We didn't have fax machines. But we had this idea that there were sports fans everywhere. And there was RCA had launched a satellite called SATCOM-1, and they were having trouble selling space on the satellite. Hard to believe because no one really thought in terms of you could do things through space and through all other than government programs or military programs. And so we had this idea, and I got fired on Memorial Day weekend, 1978, and we were talking about what we could do, and we said, let's do some sports for the Connecticut cable companies because, small state, and we were in Connecticut, and we found out the biggest, you'll chuckle at these numbers, the biggest cable company in Connecticut at that time had the staggering total of 9,500 customers. And ESPN eventually grew to over 100 million households. So it's, I think there are two things. One, it's sports fans can never seem to get enough of their favorite teams, and two, technology has been just growing, exponentially seemingly every minute. And when we got on the satellite, that was one thing. Then we could start doing satellite hops and bring things in from other parts of the world. And one thing led to another, and look where we are today. And here I am, talking to you on a medium that probably didn't even exist. We certainly didn't have cell phones back when we started.
Yeah, wow. So, Bill, when you hear the four letters ESPN, what first comes to your mind?
I guess probably, I think obviously sports. I mean, that's just it's synonymous with sports at this point. But for me personally, it was probably August 16th, 1978, my daughter's 16th birthday, and my son and I were driving to visit her, and that's when ESPN happened. I mean, in the car, we spent all day, an 8-hour round trip, and we didn't do anything but talk about sports, and 24. What are we going to do? We already had acquired the satellite, or a commitment to have a transponder the satellite, and so we were trying to fill it, and that was the most significant day, not only because it was my daughter's 16th birthday, but that was the day everything came together, right down to it, including the idea of a half-hour sports show. Nobody ever had done a half-hour sports show several times a day, and that eventually obviously became Sports Center. It was Sports Central in our talking that day, but it became Sports Center. And I think of that. And then, of course, the actual launch day was that was an incredible experience as well.
What would you say the biggest challenge for you personally was in this adventure?
Trying to find enough money to make it happen. It was a very expensive adventure, and we started off with a $9,000 credit card cash advance. That doesn't go very far. But through a series of meetings and some people that I knew, and through the hockey business, I had some acquaintances, and one thing led to another, and then we ended up with a small investment banking firm in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and they started finding some big investors for us, and after 7 major companies turned us down, Getty Oil was our 8th one, and we talked to them in December 1978, and by Valentine's Day 1979, they had agreed to go ahead and finance the business. and they committed to spending $20 million to get us started, and that's what we launched with. We had that $20 million and building a building on a piece of land. I like to tell the story. We got a piece of land that was on a redevelopment area. And when you say redevelopment area, you often wonder what it is. And my explanation was it was a garbage dump that was full and covered over, and we bought 1 acre of it. And that's where the first building for ESPN went up. And of course, today they have 15 buildings on the campus, and we were on about an acre of ground, and they have 123 acres now that have sprouted from that 1 acre location.
If you could go back in time, would you change anything that you did or done? And it's been 41 years and then 40 years upcoming for ESPN.
What would I change? I probably would change the way my contract exited. I might have made, if I had a 1/10 of a cent per subscriber for all these months, just think of what that would be. No, just kidding. I guess we had an opportunity because no one had taken any satellites at that. There was no, Ted Turner was doing some reproducing his then UHF station in Atlanta, but no one was doing anything 24 hours a day. And there were the RCA offered us 3 transponders. And if we had taken all 3 transponders, we could have sold off 2 of them or for some significant cash back in the day, or we could have kept them and maybe we'd have come up with another idea. I don't know. But 1 transponder was 24 hours a day. That's 8,760 hours of programming in a year. That's a lot of programming.
Yeah. So, Bill, let's do a fast 5 quick question round. If you could co-host your own ESPN show, who would you co-host it with?
Chris Berman.
Right on the spot. Wow.
He's been a friend obviously for a long time.
That's awesome. Best advice you ever received?
The best advice I ever received, I suspect, was my father when he said back in the 1940s, as I was coming out of high school and I graduated from college on the day the Korean War started, he always said, you can do whatever you want, always ask questions, and don't be afraid to take a chance.
Definitely. Most memorable moment at ESPN?
Launch night, 7 o'clock, September 7th, 1979. We had a building that was not quite finished. We had all of the distinguished guests, the NCAA, the Getty people, everyone coming to Bristol, and we had them all standing around in the control room and someone going through the motions, but it was the dead control room. We were actually doing the broadcast from a remote truck out back because we hadn't finished the studio.
If you could teach one college course, what would it be?
Entrepreneurialism.
Well, bringing into that question, of course, you being an entrepreneur, what's one idea that you always had, but just you didn't have time to create it?
That's a good one. I don't know. I've had about 8 or 10 businesses that I've pursued. And I'm working on one now, and I haven't finished it, so I guess that would be the one.
All right, perfect. Well, let's go back to Chris Berman. What's your favorite Chris Berman story?
Oh wow, he's got so many. The Boomer is something else, as you know. I guess on the 25th anniversary, we were in New York. They had a big facility, back when they had the ESPN restaurants. There was one in Times Square, and big 25th anniversary. And my wife and I showed up. We were invited, obviously, and we showed up and we were there. And Chris came over and gave us all the ideas all the things that were happening that night. And for some reason, he just stuck with us. And, he said, you don't really have to do this unless you want to. And he was just kind of he was shepherding us through all of the turmoil of the evening. They had the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders there. They had corporate people from all around the U.S. And I guess the only thing he said was, stick with me, and nobody's gonna have any problems. We'll get you everywhere you want to go. And so we do that, and we've done several things together over time. When several years ago they dedicated a flagpole and the campus and all that sort of stuff to me, and Chris was the master of ceremonies and was shepherding my family, my son-in-law, my granddaughters, everybody. He's just been a friend. It's really hard to pick out one thing that he's said. It's more things that he's done.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Bill, last question before we wrap up this Fusion News interview. If a college freshman came up to you and they wanted to start their own business, what would be your advice to them?
I would say I have 6 words when I talk on college campuses. I always try to leave everyone with it's really just 6 words, and it's very easy. ABC, NBC. I happen to work at affiliates of both networks, but that's not what I'm talking about when I say it here. ABC is always be curious. NBC is never be complacent. Never be afraid to ask a question, and when you ask it, never stop. Don't be complacent until you exhaust all possibilities.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. Bill, I want to say thank you again for taking the time to come on my show, and maybe we can do another one down the line when it's 40 years next year.
Sounds good to me, Alex. Enjoyed it very much, and good luck with your show, and I'm sure it's going to be very successful, and you have the enthusiasm that it takes. Remember, ask those questions and never be complacent, and who knows where we'll be. Let's talk next year. Look forward to it.
Definitely. Thank you again, Bill.
Sure thing, Alex. Have a great day.
You too. All right, Fuse Nation, just heard it from the founder of ESPN. He had a lot of great things to say about his time at ESPN and what the dream was for him. And it's just great because me being personally, I love sports. I love the Yankees. I love NFL, MLB, baseball, all kinds of different sports. And ESPN really revolutionized a lot of things. Social media, how we listen and talk about sports today. ESPN is truly one of the foundations of our country today, in a way. So I greatly appreciate Bill taking the time to come on my show today. I'm pulling up my calendar and looking at next week for the show. Jeff Pearlman will be on, and Kurt Schilling will be on very soon on this show as well. So great guests coming up next week as well. And Michael Hurley also talks some Patriot and Red Sox baseball with him as well. Well, Fuse Nation, I want to say thank you again for listening to this Fusion News episode. Always be a subscriber of Fusion News here on YouTube, and always follow me on Twitter at AlexFuse as well. Thank you again, Fuse Nation, for listening, and I will be seeing you very soon. Thanks.